Thanks, guys, for coming to our panel on the future of fish. Excited to be participating in my second sea change session on the oceans. But basically, we're planning on talking about why a shift away from extractive and destructive fishing practices is needed in the first place. And Ali, would love for you to go into that. What the takeaways were from Seaspiracy for those that haven't seen it, and what are the future opportunities that are associated with a vibrant and healthy ocean ecosystem. So going into seafood alternatives, and Chris, is a pioneering investor and entrepreneur in that space, and who's investing, and what does that just transition look like? So yeah, I am an impact investor with the Greenbaum Foundation. I'm also on the advisory board of the Aquatic Life Institute. And Ali and Chris, I'm going to have you guys maybe do your intros, and everyone's excited to hear from you. So please, and thanks again for making the time.
Well, I'll go first since I'm, like I said, least interesting. I'm Chris Kerr. I'm the Chief Investment Officer of Unovis, and we are a venture capital fund that's laser focused on replacing animals, taking them out of our food system as inherently flawed for humanity across the board. And one of the areas that we looked at pretty early on when we formed the fund was alternatives to seafood, which didn't really exist. So we co-founded Good Catch, Gathered Foods, and we went on to be the founding investor in Blue Nalu. So we'll do plant-based seafood. We'll do cellular agriculture. We'll bring anything that will help solve the equation. And at the end of the day, consumers will decide. Our job is to put it in front of them and give them a choice. So that's what we do. And I never thought it would be going as well as it has, but with the help of people like Ali and films like Seaspiracy, it supercharges consumers in a way that we need. So thank you, Ali. I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome. Hello everyone. My name is Ali Tabrizi. I'm the director of the Netflix documentary Seaspiracy, and when our film was released earlier this year, it climbed to the top 10 movies on Netflix. It went viral online. It was talked about in newspapers around the world, and has really sparked an entire movement, which, from where we're looking at it, has forever changed the way we look at ocean conservation. And while making that movie, we were really pushing ourselves as hard as we possibly could to expose this story, which we felt had been silenced for years. And along the way, we were confronting countless wildlife traders, being chased by police, witnessing all these whales being slaughtered. And it was an incredible journey of trying to reveal the truth of what was going on. And often for me, some of the most disturbing moments were actually while sitting in ordinary rooms, just doing ordinary interviews with people that were actually very powerful and influential, only to find out that they were either completely incompetent in leading the solutions to this global crisis, or were flat out lying to us. And I think that was something that, when it translated on screen, was something that ignited audiences to want to do more. And I think we've seen huge levels of change of people just across the board ditching wildlife products, ditching animals, ditching fish from their diet, and signing petitions, getting involved, sharing about it online. And that's what has really sparked the movement. It's now everyone's film in a way.
Incredible. I know it was a really powerful movie for a lot of people that I know that just weren't aware of any of the perils of commercial overfishing. And so thank you for bringing this into the world. And I also know that Dr. Sylvia Earle, one of my heroes, has expressed many times her gratitude to you for this is just the start of the conversation. I know that she has been trying in various ways to bring it up, but you guys really brought it to the forefront. So I guess if you could maybe help us understand what it is that we need to do now. And Chris, I'd love for you to kind of dive into that if you could as well. But I will throw a Sylvia Earle quote in there. I must. Our past, our present, and whatever remains of our future absolutely depend on what we do now, and no blue, no green. So why do we even have to change what we're doing?
Well,
why do we need to evolve away from this?
to throw in another quote, when's the best time to plant a tree 20 years ago? When's the second best time today? We need to do something. And it's you can change people's hearts and minds for a short period of time. It doesn't generally stick unless you come to them with a solution. And so we've been focusing on the solution side. You can build awareness, which is exactly what Seaspiracy is doing and others out there. But to get it to truly stick in long-term sustainable behavioral change, you may need to make it super, super, super easy for humans who have all sorts of drivers that are having them make decisions that are, quite frankly, rather fleeting. And what I try to do is boil it down to a really, really simple question. What is for lunch? Because at the end of the day, or at the beginning of the day when you wake up, you don't think, boy, I really want to grab a hold of a piece of tuna or a fish, tuna fish, and put my teeth into its belly. The day goes on, you get a little hungry, and you think, how am I going to satisfy this urge? And the question is, can we satisfy the urge without causing all of this colossal damage throughout our entire ecosystem? The answer is yes. It just takes a little bit of innovation. And we're trying to break into a system. It's about, well, in some cases, we've been drinking milk for 6,000 years. We've been eating fish for about 2 million years. We're trying to change a system that's pretty set in our ways. So what can we do to make that easier? Well, the answer is it comes down to culinary delight. Is something delightful or not? And if not, well, it's not going to stick. And so we're trying to solve that side. So as awareness builds up on the one side and consumers have this call to action, your aspiration versus your action, and the chasm between, we can solve. We just need to pay attention to the chasm. If you just acknowledge both extremes and don't create the bridge, you don't get there. And so I think what Ali is doing and people that work in this movement are creating this call to action, which is the aspirational side. But at the end of the day, you're going to make a decision that's really simple. What am I going to have for lunch? I want a tuna melt. What do I got in the refrigerator? Did it hurt any animals? That may come in later. Did it hurt the environment? That may come in later. We need to be able to solve that today. So trying to make it easy.
Well, thanks for everything you're doing, Chris. And I know that, you are one of the early champions of seafood alternatives. I'm going to hand it over to Ali to talk about, maybe for those that haven't seen Seaspiracy, what the takeaways are in terms of why we need to change. And Chris, I'd like to come back to you afterwards to discuss some of the challenges and opportunities in these alternatives.
For sure. Yeah, I think, for me, growing up, I was enamored, I was fascinated and in love with the ocean. It was this mysterious, magical place. And I'd had images of David Attenborough documentaries fed into my TV screen ever since I was a kid. And it's what lit up my room at night. I was all the hues of the Great Barrier Reef and the Pacific Ocean teeming with all this life and slow motion and magical music. It was just a natural draw to one day want to explore this. But when I grew up a little bit more, and I think I was about 17, this huge whale washed up basically on my doorstep. It was right down the road from the beach right near where I lived. And I felt completely robbed of this opportunity to see these incredible animals alive. There's something these species I'd admired in these National Geographic magazines were now dead. And soon enough, more of these reports were coming forward. And I began to realize that the oceans were really in peril. And what sparked this journey was to try and understand what the leading killer of our oceans were. Because if we have a problem, if we have the oceans are in crisis, we need to accurately diagnose that problem in order to actually be effective in dealing with solutions. Because for so many, if we end up getting this wrong, we could be spending who knows how many billions of dollars, human resources, and decades of our time that's precious in the wrong direction. And we'll look back in another 20 years and realize, oh, we got it all wrong. So it's crucial that we actually address the leading cause of the problem. If we have a sinking ship, there's a huge hole at the bottom. We need to fix that first before we use buckets at the top. And that was the ethos when approaching this story. And so the longer we were on this journey, the more we're uncovering, the more we began to realize that whether it was the issues surrounding plastic pollution in our oceans, or the issues of even coral reefs dying out, the reason why the leading killer of dolphins, whales, turtles, seals, manta rays, bluefin tuna, sharks, you name it, it was all coming down to the fishing industry. Large areas of our ocean are polluted, not with plastic straws, which we're making about 0.03% of the plastic entering the ocean. A lot of it's coming from fishing nets. So I was approaching this story and actually finding that, okay, the biggest problem that we need to fix is the fishing industry and what we eat. And that's having the biggest impact on our oceans.
And I imagine you really felt like there was a huge gap in awareness about the contributions that the fishing industry makes to the plastic pollution. I know that it was only a few years ago that I began to even understand that if I wanted to really fight oceans plastics, this was even an option in you know, or one of the tools that we could use to diminish oceans plastic. So I'd love to just before we throw to Chris and talk a bit about the challenges to scaling this industry and to getting where we need to be to save our oceans and to save the biodiversity. Can I ask you what the reactions have been? I know we started talking about it a little bit in the pre-room, but have you been surprised by how little people were aware of this? I know that I had participated in that call with the admiral in the U.S. Navy that was just saying, "Hey, we need to be educated on this." I would have thought, of course, they must know, and that was the discussion on illegal fishing. And I'd just love to hear, you know, how what's jumped out at you.
Yeah, so I mean, you mentioned we were on a call. It's almost a week after it was very soon after the film was released. We were speaking to one of the admirals of the U.S. Navy and also like a senator of Bont or something. I forget exactly. And they were both kind of shocked and impressed by the documentary and how it was able to really sort of, like I was saying, diagnose what was going on in our ocean. These are people that are policymakers that were uninformed and people that had spent their lives at sea that were also learning new things. So that was incredible to see that we've had people from the government side of things. We've also had people from all aspects of society, kids, grandparents, parents, schools reaching out to us, not just in the UK or the United States, but you know, small screenings taking place in Indonesia, people from small fishing villages watching it and sharing it. We've had celebrities in South Korea. We've had you know, whether it be, and then also in the UK, Western society, Paul McCartney, Kourtney Kardashian, members of One Direction, and also just more private messages as well. We've had from very well-known people like Ellen DeGeneres and people like that. So it's been really huge, and it's been great to see that these people with a lot of influence have, you know, been able to share Seaspiracy to their followers, to a new audience. And I think that's why Seaspiracy was sort of rising up to be a trending movie and something that almost everyone was talking about. So we've been super impressed by that, and also shocked that, yeah, people just didn't know about this and were shocked by what they were finding on screen.
Amazing. One Direction, wow. Chris, so in the spaces that you are investing in and where you have entrepreneurial ventures, what are you seeing are really the challenges right now? Where can we accelerate this change? Are the bottlenecks around, you think, manufacturing? Is it machinery? Is it just plain investment dollars going into the space? Like demand? Could you tell us a bit about what you're seeing right now in the space? And I know it's grown a lot. You know, it's even 5 years ago was kind of a different world when it came to options.
I have a bad habit of going on monologues, and you just teed me up for like 3 hours. So I'm going to try to keep it in check. First of all, the first thing that we wanted to do was separate the fishing industry from the seafood industry. You know, one is gathering proteins, the other is eating something, right? And so in our case, we said, look, let's create a protein in the case of seafood that is enjoyable, that's nutrient dense, that digests well. And then from there, let's talk about how we're going to address the sea creatures that we're going after. Now, I'm pulling out some numbers that are undoubtedly not accurate. There's people on this call that will fact check this, and I'm happy to have them do it. But something like 40% of the global population relies on seafood as a core protein. But any one fish, we eat between 200 and 300 different types of sea creatures, right? So we can't just go out and say we're gonna make chicken now, we're gonna make beef now. We don't talk about it that way. We lump all seafood in as one massive animal, which it isn't. They're all very, very different. Our three largest sea creatures that we eat, I think by mass, are shrimp number 1, salmon number 2, and tuna number 3. Every single part of that system has a problem with it. And the only thing that they keep kind of focusing on is, yeah, but those healthy oils, so good for you. Good protein, good healthy oils, but they're ignoring everything else. The human atrocities, the plastic waste, everything that kind of comes with it is somewhat flawed along the way. So what we're trying to do is go back to the end of the equation. Say, did this taste good? Is it a duplicable event eating this product? Because if they're not eating fish, if they're not eating tuna fish, they're going to eat pizza, they're going to eat chicken, they're going to eat something else. And what we're trying to do is make this part of the menu. The problem is the world has been taught to believe that fish is the healthy alternative, just like pork was the other white meat. Like it's a part of it's a lot in the marketing side of it. People who catch things sell what they catch, and the reality is it's fairly indiscriminate. What we want to do is try to concentrate on what are we offering? What is it that creates something of value to the human so that they can adopt that instead of the alternative? It's called share of stomach. Let's go after a piece of the stomach that they're trying to fill. Let's not worry about whether or not we're saving all sea life in the process. If we take away the market demand for it, some of these other things that are problematic with the fishing industry trying to solve themselves, they kind of take it out. And so what we're ultimately trying to do is go back to solving that simple equation: what's for lunch, and then what's on the menu, right? That can create this as an exciting, adoptable platform for people who have conscience. And ultimately, you're looking at a series of ingredients, building blocks that allow that to happen. In the case of all plant-based meats, it's a group of building blocks. It could be soy, it could be all pea protein, all sorts of things. How can you bring them together to create a culinary experience that's good? Combining food tech and innovation with culinary arts, good old traditional culinary arts, and get it to the consumers. And we focus on what's called the food pack: price, awareness, convenience, and taste. Solve taste, make people aware of it, get the price right and put it in front of them. It ends up becoming what's for lunch. If the call to action shows up, you got a very short period of time. People can't unsee something, but they will unremember it. And what you want to do is make sure that memory sticks. In Seaspiracy, man, Kirsty and my wife and I watched that, and we were within tears within a couple of minutes. It's very, very hard for us to witness that, but bearing witness is critical. So if you can take that call to action and solve it with a solution quickly, that's the cycle that we love. And we hope that the work that we do together makes the market rise. Right now, it is just getting started. It's so early.
Can I, as a follow-up to that, do you believe, alternative proteins have gotten a bit of press since the Beyond IPO, but some have said, hey, there's not a lack of investment in the alternative protein space. Let's move on to something else. Do you believe that's true, that investment dollars are no longer kind of needed in this space?
Are you kidding me? I mean, think about it. The total addressable market isn't whatever people think the plant-based sector is today. I mean, 5 years ago it was $4 billion. Now I don't even know, it's way bigger. It's $1.7 trillion a year. That's how much animal protein we're eating every single year. 1.7 trillion. If you can't find an investment opportunity in there, you're not looking close enough. And this is all over the globe, right? So if you break that down and say, look, I just need to get a company going from 0 to 10 million in sales, you've done your job. That's how we're made up. And Tyson and Cargill can coexist. So can a lot of these startups. Somebody asked me recently, well, where do you think we are in the investment cycle? Are we in the 7th inning here? I said, we're at the second batter in the very first inning of the first half of the inning. This thing is just getting started. You walk into any mall court, food court, or go into a hawker in Singapore, you'll see dead animals everywhere. That's our addressable market. We need to go after all of it.
Ali, that was baseball. There's probably a cricket equivalent.
It's cricket. I won't know what you're talking about. So, but go for it.
Probably, yeah.
No, thanks for that, Chris.
And there is a question about Blue Nile. So the way that I look at Cell Ag is every tool should be on the table. In the world of seafood, you got skipjack, tuna, and whatever blend is Subway selling, all the way up to the high end of bluefin, and all of that's on the menu. And there's entry points for all of it. Right. And again, you're going after consumer experience.
Sure. And Chris, sorry, I'm going to dial back a quick second. For those that aren't aware of Blue Nalu or know what cultivated meat or seafood is, do you mind just giving a very quick rundown on what that is and
Sure.
what we can expect in that space?
Yeah, I mean, we've been able to make cells divide and grow for some time, and they've been generally used to make organs and ears or whatever it is, surgeons wanted.
And,
yeah. We moved it over to with the first investment in Memphis Meats and a company called Mosa Meats, making land animals. And in the case of aquaculture, we co-founded Blue Nile. It was part of that process. If you can make it work for one species, you could probably make it for a bunch. And so that, again, the entry point matters. What are you trying to make? I can make a tuna fish sandwich today with good catch, but if I want an ahi tuna, or if I want a bluefin tuna on sushi, we can't do that yet. And so everybody gets to play in that from the R&D side. Now, I think you brought something up that's really critical. It's about investment. Silk soy milk, for those who know that brand came out 20 years after the founding of White Wave. That was through R&D. Beyond Meat was a chicken company before the burger came out 8 years later. Oatly just did its IPO 25 years after founding. Inside all of that is the R&D. You have to invest in the R&D. Discovery comes through that. With discovery comes engineering achievement. And we focus on, in Cell Ag, we focus on the scientific discovery first, then engineering achievement to make sure that it's scalable, and then finally, consumer acceptance. And you have to follow that path. We have to invest in that. You invest in it, they'll come. And we all need to remember, 4 or 5 years ago, the Beyond Burger wasn't even in existence. The Impossible Burger wasn't in existence. Memphis Meats wasn't in existence, or now Upfield. Give us another decade, we'll have food that's way better than any animal suffering that's happening today to produce our meat. It'll just be better.
And as we are looking to reach price parity, at least when it comes to these products versus the animal equivalents, my understanding, and again, please, everybody fact check and let us know, but approximately $40 billion in the US alone, I think, goes to animal agriculture. And then, Ali, you'll have the figure, again, from the movie. What's the amount for
Subsidies?
Commercial fishing of global subsidies?
It's in the region of about $35 billion.
$35 billion. Do we know what portion of that subsidizes alternatives or cellular, like R&D?
Goose egg. And that will change.
All that money is going into building bigger ships, to pay for more fuel for these boats, to pay for nets, to pay for fishing licenses. It's all destructive, all of it.
Yeah.
And how much?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
We can't. So it's not even the subsidies. It's lack of oversight. It's allowing slave labor to happen. It's allowing, there's a different entire payroll system for farm workers. They don't have to adhere to any, there's non-farm workers. That's what we track, because there's a whole different set for farm workers. And if we're all working on the same playing field, we would do better.
Do we also know what portion goes to subsidizing like fruits and vegetables even?
I don't know.
Somebody told me it was like under 1%, but I'd love for somebody to fact check that. But it was, it was pretty shocking to me.
Taking into account that the plant agricultural subsidies is often being funneled back to feeding livestock as well. So those farmers are getting subsidized animal agriculture and subsidized plants to feed those cows as well.
Great point.
Yeah.
Great point.
You got everything from waste protection programs to dumping excess waste or excess food into school systems and into prisons. It's all very, very unfair. That will start shifting, but it'll be the more progressive governments that do it. It'll likely come out of Europe or somewhere in it most likely won't be in the United States where we actually get to see this. These are very sticky.
Well, it's not, I'll say one other thing. It's not just dumping them into schools and things. There's stories of tons of live pigs being buried alive in the ground because they didn't want these surplus pigs to affect the market price, because you've got to create scarcity. So, and that economics is playing into the fishing industry. You get the economics of extinction, which Paul Watson talks a lot about. As species become less and less available in the ocean, the price of it goes up. And so there's an incentive actually built into the model that the less fish there are, the more price you're going to get for those, like bluefin tuna. Like one bluefin tuna, the record sale for it is about $3.1 million. And then you get the economics of slavery coming into it, because now we have less fish, then you have to spend more time out at sea fishing, and yet the costs of fishing remain the same. The licenses remain the same or get more expensive. The price of fuel for these boats remains or stays more expensive. Maintenance, all of that goes up. The only place you can really cut your costs as a captain is on the labor. And that's why so many people are ending up trafficked onto these boats, kidnapped at sea for decades at a time. So this is the criticism that often is directed in the plant alternative space, like the alternative seafood space, is, well, look, what about all the jobs created from the fishing industry? You know, and yet you look at it, and that industry is going to put itself out of work regardless. When the oceans are empty of fish, they're not going to have any jobs anyway. And actually, the places where you're having the most innovation and the most jobs coming about is actually in the plant-based sector.
Yeah, and they're very sticky when they get there. I grew up in dairy country in Pennsylvania. My first job was cleaning the udders on cows at 7 years old. That industry ate itself long before plant-based milks came to market, about 20 years ahead of that. We watched, when I was growing up, every field had either alfalfa, corn, or cows in it. Today it's nothing but soy, and there's no cows anywhere because they've consolidated, they ate themselves. The fishing industry does the same thing. Industrial fishing has come through. It's basically pulled out all the local subsistence fishers. It's made it impossible. And do a little history on Ned Ludd, the Luddites, and you'll get a little bit of a background on he wasn't a real man, but the concept, we haven't gotten that one right too often. The reality is farmers have been changing crops for millennia. They do it quickly. They adapt very quickly. They go to where the money is, and we can do that. We still need farmers. We still need to eat. We're not making fake food. We're making real food. It's just not made out of real fish. So we had to ask the real serious question is, I might want a hamburger. Do I have to have a cow involved? I might want tuna fish. Do I have to have the tuna fish involved? Do I have to have a lobster? No, I'm looking for the culinary experience. I didn't ask for the eyes or the tail or the fin or the scales. I asked for that one single bite of culinary experience. Can I get you that? And if I can do that, then you should drop the argument as to why an animal had to be involved in it. If you're able to make that very, very small step, it's not a big ask, make that small step, the chances are you're going to be doing quite a bit of good for the rest of the world in the process. The real question has to do with identity when it comes to behavioral change. Who do I identify as? I'm from Philadelphia. I grew up eating Philadelphia cheesesteaks 4 or 5 times a week. I identified as a Philly cheesesteak eater, and it was hard for me to make that shift to say I'm now vegan. That was not well received, I might add, amongst a lot of people I know.
Can't imagine. Yep.
But I had a good partner in my wife, Kirsty Golson, who was like, yeah, we're going to get on this path and we're going to follow it. That was the best thing that I've ever done. Now, I wanted to convince other people to do it too, but I had to make the stakes really small for them. Can you just try this one thing? Give it a shot,
I think the other issue, and thank you for sharing all that, and I would add to that there seems to be confusion about the health benefits of certain dishes around or consumption of fish, the iron and the protein that you get from beef, and what was really interesting that came out earlier this year is if you look at the health guides of countries outside the US, they're so incredibly different. Basically, the USDA is also dictating our food pyramid from what I understand. So that seems one, like a huge conflict of interest. But second, there's a study that came out in Canada from their cardiovascular society, omitting fish completely from the recommended heart healthy diet. And I think it's really notable that most people think, okay, well, fish, you need it. I need to eat this because I need it for my health. There's a lot of confusion, and there's a lot of health evidence that just points to the fact that that's not true.
We need to know what you're solving for. Are you solving because you need a healthy oil? Then go get a healthy oil. You don't need the fish. And everybody, by the way, likes to point to that one thing. People can say, eat your ketchup because it's got lycopene in it, or whatever that is. That doesn't make ketchup healthy. And ultimately, you want to look at what's the core dish. You might have fish, but if you're going to deep fry it and put it in on a big white bun with a whole bunch of mayonnaise on top of it, I got news for you. You lost the argument already. If all you wanted was that healthy oil, go have a little bit of healthy oil. I became vegan. Everybody said, watch your vitamin B12. That's a single shot in my mouth once a week that tastes delicious. That is not a hard thing to solve.
But it's also people that aren't vegan need B12 too. So it's not.
Oh no, exactly.
Vegan.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
What are you solving for? What are you solving for? And I think everybody gets to point to that. What I'm trying to look at is most people don't sit down and just eat a fish or just eat a burger or just eat a steak. They do something with it. And I was recently asked, what's the moonshot for the best plant-based meat out there? I said, a really good hot sauce. Because at the end of the day, we dress everything up. A1 steak sauce is vegan. Like, what are we doing to make the culinary experience good if we can use all of those tools, all of them? Everything's on the table, from the pretzel bun to the hot dog to the burger. Is that a good experience, and is it better for you? Might not be perfect, but it is better.
Always pretzel buns, in my opinion. Ali, so Chris, you brought up aquaculture. Ali, I would love for you, since you go into this a little bit in the movie, I think there's just some confusion about aquaculture in general, and would love for you to touch upon what you see maybe as, good aquaculture, maybe more extractive aquaculture. What is aquaculture? What is aquaculture?
Okay, so aquaculture right now is being heralded as the blue revolution, which is here to save the day. It's here to save the ocean. Give us all your investment capital, and we're going to turn it into incredibly healthy farmed salmon. And so it's getting a lot of investment, and everyone's looking to it as the solution to the problems facing our oceans.
So by aquaculture, you mean the farming of fish, not necessarily like growing seaweed, or is that considered aquaculture?
No. Yeah, so there's many different aspects to aquaculture, and so even there's many aspects to fish farming. You can have fish farming in sea pens. You can also farm fish on land in vats of water. There's a lot of things to it. And so the impact also sits on a spectrum. Not everything's the same, but what they all have in common when it comes to the farming of fish is that there's always going to be a feed conversion ratio that would signify that it was just better to essentially, like, in order to grow salmon, you need to feed it more fish, okay, because they're carnivorous fish. And so naturally you're losing a lot of the fish in the process, because fish burn a lot of that through metabolism. They poop. A lot of those fish die and never make it onto the plate. Sometimes the feed conversion rates are absolutely ridiculous. And so anyways, it's being heralded as the blue revolution. And when you actually look at underwater footage from these farms, you find that they're being eaten alive by sea lice. The pollution is turning the sea floor into sludge. It's killing the natural habitat. And it's not something that we need to be looking at as the solution to our problems, okay? And so I think there's a lot of deception going on with this, and quite frankly, I find it dangerous and along the lines of being fraud. So we need to move away from that direction. It's a false profit.
Yeah, I agree.
We need to get into looking at the marine plants being grown, because they have huge potential and fill that section in the marketplace in terms of jobs. So there are some algae and seaweeds that will grow like a meter a day, or some. I've heard crazy things, like maybe even a couple of hours they grow so much, and it's packed with iron, more calcium than milk and kelp. You got omegas in there, and I've even seen some stats that show that algae oil can be sometimes even more absorptive in the body than fish oil. So that's what I want to leave out. Sorry, Chris.
Yeah, I mean it's a problem solving another problem. We have not done well industrializing animal agriculture. It hasn't served humans very well. It tends to be packaged up nicely, but at the end of the day, it's still a flawed model. And anytime a model is flawed, you try to make it up through extreme efficiency. And we have a very efficient food system that is immeasurably flawed. And we keep trying to just make it a little bit tighter, and you start cutting corners, whether that's effluence or dumping waste or human slavery, it ends up becoming something that just kind of gets worse. And that's why we wanted to hit the reset button and say, well, what's the real problem we're trying to solve? There's another main ingredient that we really need to address, and it's a serious one, particularly in parts of the world that are developing nations, which is the number one ingredient in all food is actually hunger. If you're starving, you'll eat anything. And the real question is, are we creating something that can actually solve bigger crises around the globe? We started hunting for animals millennia. We started actually cultivating farms, I don't know what, 70,000 years ago. That was the beginning of kind of a flawed model. I don't know that this has been playing out very well, but hunger is going to become a bigger issue with climate change. And the real question, as I look at it, is these island nations are starting to get swallowed. Sea creatures are dying. Your food is dying right along with it. What can you do to actually create an opportunity for people to thrive, give them jobs that are on land? We need to reinvent that as well. And I think these solutions tend to solve many at once rather than creating other problems. And aquaculture is just, like I said, it's a problem solving another problem.
Yeah. And I want to tell a story also, sorry.
Please.
You mentioned those island nations and those coastal communities. They're actually the most impacted by the fish farming industry a lot of the time, indirectly. And so in the film, we have a shot of one of these canoe fishermen in Liberia begging for food out at sea. And what we found was that a majority of the fishing boats over there are capturing fish called trash fish. They're the kind of fish that don't have much value. They're not shrimp, they're not bluefin tuna, and so it's just everything else, usually juvenile species that would eventually grow up into more important species. But they're taking those fish and then they're transporting them over to land, where often along the west coast of Africa, you're having these beautiful, pristine jungles and beach locations being bulldozed and turned into fish meal factories, where a lot of this fish is being ground up into fish meal and fish oil, turned into pellets and shipped around the world to feed farmed salmon. And so we're taking away food from those local communities who absolutely rely on it to feed farmed salmon in places like Norway, Scotland, Chile, Tasmania, and the rest of it. And what's crazy is we found that one of these farms up in Scotland, which was, by the way, the gold standard of what Scotland was pushing as their absolute model farm of the most efficient, sustainable farm, in just a single month, they had so many deaths in this fish farm. It was something like 300 tons or 3,000 tons. It was a huge amount of fish that died of disease. They had to just take them out and dump them in landfill. And so even though that may be 300 or 3,000 tons of fish, imagine the rest of the fish that it took to feed those fish. You're talking huge quantities of fish being taken from around the world from these impoverished communities. And it's no wonder that I was able to capture footage of these people starving at sea.
Thanks, Ali. That's really disturbing and disheartening. And I would just add, I know I've talked about this with you guys before, but my family on my father's side is from the Philippines, from an island called Iloilo, and it's just it's tragic to see. We could see the glow of the huge commercial fishing vessels from another country coming into Philippine waters and taking the fish every night. And we've worked and helped local villages that have been affected by this, and the fisher folk, they just, exactly as you both said, cannot make a living. So they're looking at ways to kind of transition into organic produce farming. There's a trade system for this. It's actually higher value than anything that they can kind of eke out of the oceans now, even. And so I really think that for those that would want to look out for the well-being of especially low island nations, coastal communities, indigenous communities, there's just, I think, really exciting opportunities to transition into other types of work, but we need to build the infrastructure for them to do that. And over in the Philippines, there's so much seaweed. It's in the biodiversity triangle. Well, there's amazing things you can do with that.
There's so much opportunity in these places where currently we're just it's almost like we're in the dark ages and we have all this potential and all this opportunity and we're wasting it. The Philippines are being hit hard. You look off the coast, it's everywhere. You look off the coast of Chile and you will see, like, it's literally like a city at nighttime. You can see it if you're in a plane going over this part of Chile at nighttime. It's like a nighttime city that's floating out there because all of these hundreds of thousands or thousands of vessels, I should say, use bright lights at night to attract all the squid. They capture all the squid. It gets sent all around the world. People have no idea of the scale of the fishing industry, and because it happens out of sight, out of mind all the time. So we need innovation here, like, more than ever. This is where the importance of what Chris Kerr is doing. Because without that, we're just going to remain in the dark ages.
And Chris, maybe we could wrap with this and then start to take questions. And I'm so excited for everything that you all have brought up. So please do come up and chat with us. But Chris, I guess in terms of ways that we can broach this, like who even investors I think are starting to care. Like for seaweed, I was excited to see the Department of Energy have like one project. ARPA-E has one project on seaweed called Mariner, and they're giving grants to researchers that are doing like strain selection work with seaweed. But a lot of it kind of stays in academia or stays, in some of these research institutions. What are you excited about when it comes to players that are starting to invest in this space, or even opportunities for those that are entrepreneurs in the group? Opportunities to invest and opportunities to, I guess, get investment. Who's starting to pay attention to this?
Oh yeah, I mean so there's a lot to cover in there, and one of the things I want to talk about is orphaned assets. We have an infrastructure. You can imagine if everybody went to plant-based milk, you'd have the dairy industry in collapse. And the question is, what can you do with those orphaned assets? In the case of seaweed, we had a alternative energy policy in the 90s and aughts that was going to use seaweed to make alternative energy, and it didn't really work. And so some of that's getting repurposed for food. We probably have an enormous amount of production capacity for things like seafood or seaweed as an ingredient, algae as an ingredient. And they're trying to find homes for that. The problem is most of it's green. It turns your meat green, right? So you want to be careful about how you're doing that. The opportunities are kind of everywhere, and it all depends on what it is you want to do. Not every company has to go out and think that they need to be an IPO like a Beyond Meat or become a Nestle in 150 years. Businesses need to just go out there and get to work. And so you look at your opportunity. I don't care whether you're a small bakery or a little fish fry. It doesn't matter. Try something new. And my hope is that people find their own way, because that's what entrepreneurs do. And so I'll leave it to the entrepreneurs to find that out. I don't have that much advice to give them, other than, again, if you can't find a home in $1.7 trillion of addressable market, you're probably not looking quite well enough. The part about academia is a big one. Like I said, we've been dividing cells and getting them to grow for some time. We took a pretty big risk with Upside, Memphis Meats at the time, to pull that out of academia and try to commercialize it. And we had to do it in a way that really brought attention to the investment community. So David Anderson was a chef out of LA. I said, David, this is gonna be the very most expensive meatball you will have ever made. It's gonna have a very little bit of meat in it. And you're gonna need to make it look good and make it look real and make it taste good, most importantly. And he showed up to make that very first meatball for Memphis Meats. And he said, Chris, this is a really small amount of meat. And I said, you got to do your best you can. But we had the Wall Street Journal come in and cover it so that it was really clear that if you can do it, chances are you can scale it. And so what we want to do is really make it clear that if this is to leave academia, there's a pretty good chance that investment dollars will come in and support that. What we didn't realize was that industry was going to show up and say, okay, we're paying attention now. When Cargo redefined itself as a protein company from a meat company, everyone followed suit. Bumblebee is a distributor for Good Catch. If you're in the business of satisfying customers' needs, you shouldn't really care what they're asking to buy from you. You should just take their dollar and give them what they're asking for. And so what we're trying to do is make these opportunities better so that everybody wins. It's not a fight against the fishing companies and the seafood companies and Chris Kerr. It's if we have a big enough tent and the party that's going on side is pretty fun and the meal is good, let's stick around and see who gravitates towards each other. And so what I would ask entrepreneurs to do is keep a really big open mind, be open to who your partners can be, engage them, have a dialogue, not a fight. It doesn't have to be adversarial, and talk about a path forward rather than combating each other on why you shouldn't do something. Talk about why maybe you should do something.
Absolutely. And I also want to point out that there are some really cool partnerships that are brewing in this space, and it's awesome that Long John Silver had tested some of Good Catch's products, and I believe
we're pretty excited about that. At the end of the day, again, you have to meet the consumers where they are, and if they're going to Long John Silver, let's try to meet them there. But that takes some daringness. There's a term I refer to as the NGen. It's the unknown generation that has now moved its way into a position of influence. They tend to be middle managers in very large corporations where there was a time when them saying, I want to put a Beyond Burger, I want to put a vegetarian burger on the menu, somebody would say, if you get it wrong, you're fired. Today, if they don't take that risk, they'll get fired. And you're having a lot of companies realize they missed the boat and they're wondering why the middle managers were at risk. It's because somebody up top said that we're not taking any risks. You need to be a little more adventurous today because the consumer is a lot more adventurous today than he or she was in the past. And we need to take advantage of that and have fun with it.
Yeah, no, and people are waking up to the opportunity, I think. I mean, Bill Gates just specifically talked about cultivated meat in his book on climate solutions. I believe his group has started to invest at least in the space. So this is absolutely, if one is to think of the future of fish, it's not extractive. It's going to be better for the oceans. It's going to help, I think, save the biodiversity of our marine life, and it's absolutely necessary that this happens now, as Sylvia Earle said.
Think small too. I mean, it's good to have a worldview, but take an action today. Just try something new. I never liked olives. I eat olives now because I finally told myself I don't have to identify as a guy who doesn't like olives. I don't like cilantro because I don't like the taste of it. So I just don't eat cilantro, but I don't have to have an attitude about it. I'm trying to do less of that. So I'm trying to broaden my own mind around these things. And in doing so, I'm actually having one hell of a time enjoying my food. And I didn't become a food lover until I became vegan. And I don't necessarily tout veganism for everybody, but it was something that mattered a lot to me.
Amazing. Well, thanks, guys. So I would like to get to some of the questions. So if you would like to come up, click the share audio and video, and then you can just click leave to go off screen. And once you do that, we can bring you up, I believe. So otherwise, let's just I think I tried to bring a few people up. I hope that worked. Maybe they just need to accept. Okay, well, let's maybe start with Carl's question. Or actually,
Carl just showed up. Click on his button.
I just click plus.
There's Carl.
Hi.
Hey, Carl.
Hi, Carl.
Very dark Australia at 3:30 in the morning, so excuse me if I'm a bit sleepy.
Thanks for staying up.
Unfortunately, all the great stuff's happening internationally at the moment, and without being able to travel, we have a lot of conferences and meetings at midnight.
Yeah, no doubt.
Thanks for the session, everyone. So I run a marine conservation charity, and we work a lot in coastal developing communities around the world. I think one of the biggest challenges that we find is these conversations are had by people like us from the developing world, largely the countries that aren't having the biggest impact on global fisheries. And if I was to have these conversations with our team in India or the Solomons, they'd just look at me as if I was absolutely insane. So I think this is the biggest challenge that we find, and we're trying to develop solutions where we turn waste into wealth through setting up community household waste collections that are run by marginalised women in these fishing communities to empower them. And then we turn that waste into composting and aquaponic systems. I don't eat meat. I'm not particularly fond of aquaponic systems, yet I lead an organisation that is building these systems to develop resilience and bring back fish stocks and wild reefs. In India, through our data and research, we found that about 20 fish species have collapsed through observational data with the fishermen there. Just in the last 12 years, a lot of them have said, and we've been out on the boats with them, and literally they have completely destroyed the ocean, as your movie, Ali, goes into in great detail. I'm really interested in how we take these conversations and how we develop these ideas, like you all are, to implement, because there is such a gap at the moment in terms of, all these great ideas out there, but implementation is really difficult. And where's the funding available, and where are those opportunities, and what do you guys see as not even starting these conversations, but developing some of these solutions in coastal communities where these conversations aren't something that are even on people's radar.
Well, I'll start real quick, and then Ali can chime in. If we had stayed with the old McDonald farm system that we used to have, and maybe before that something that was even a little lighter, we probably wouldn't be having the discussion we're having today. It's the industrial side of this that's become a problem. And I was asked, well, what happens when good catch becomes global, and these these small fishing communities in, I think it was Mauritius or something, what do they do? I said, I'll be dead by then. I will literally be dead by the time that becomes an issue, and it's likely some of these islands will be underwater. But we have to start somewhere. So I can't solve for everything, and I'm not going to, obviously. I'm just trying to start the conversation. And in our little world, that's what we try to do. Our hope is that governments will step in and do something, and it won't be because good catch was successful. It will be because fisheries collapsed, because oceans rose, because things died along the way, and crops will have to likely change along the way. So what we want to do is at least have some tools that can head in that direction. And then you get into things like orphaned assets and the likes that perhaps we can put to work. But innovation is going to lead the way at the end of the day. And I would hope that some of these countries could be part of that innovation process. Ali, I don't know if you have anything you want to add.
Yeah, I'll chip in. Good to meet you, Carl. Good question. And sounds like you're doing great work down there in, what did you say, India and the Solomon Islands?
Yeah, and Australia, but different situation, obviously.
Yeah, so I'm not an expert in what's going on there, but I think, like you were saying, those places that tend to be hit often the most hardest are the ones that usually aren't the ones taking a lot of the fish. And I know that the Solomon Islands, I believe there's a huge tuna industry there. Which I think like a huge percentage of the world's tuna is being caught around there, usually on these sort of dolphin-safe tuna boats, which, yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on with that. And so it would seem like if we can fix the consumer side of the problem here, which is the one that is swallowing up all the fish, and we can get the big consumer nations, whether it be, the US, a lot of the European countries, even China and Australia, to stop consuming a lot of that tuna, that it's going to have benefits on those local communities, because that's why often it's being impoverished, unless it's like the local fish populations are going because of local consumption. Have you found that, or is it not the case?
India for sure. I mean, the challenge with India is obviously population, coastal communities, and a huge consumption of fish. But you're totally right. In the Solomons, it is a different situation, and it's generally due to the global demand. Yeah,
and it's usually southern India where there's a lot of fishing, right?
Yeah, that's where we are in Kerala. Yeah.
Kerala, yeah, I've been there. I think it's something that's happened a lot, and also many. Paul Watson told me the story that many years ago there was a Norwegian fishing fleet that basically trawled. It was like a whole fleet that trawled the whole length of Western India, and they took so much fish that they put about 1 million people out of work. No one talked about it. And it's really ironic that often the sort of plant-based, the vegans, the conservationists get blamed for, hey, you're going to get rid of all these jobs. But meanwhile, it's the fishing industry, the industrial fishing industry, and the Western consumers, they're actually funding that. So I'm just keeping my fingers crossed that we can sort things out here, and hopefully it has some knock-on effects that benefit those communities.
Great. Thanks, guys. Keep
Thanks,
up the good
Carl.
work.
Yeah, you too.
Cheers.
Thanks, Carl. I wanted to address, and I don't know if she is in a position to come up and ask her question herself, but Sarah Burgess, hope I'm pronouncing that right, said, she said, well said, Carl. So thank you, Carl, for your question. And she writes, putting at the forefront of our conversation should be listening and meeting communities around the world at their intersectional point to how their sustenance is gathered from their environment. Agree that it's exciting times and so great to have NGO, NPOs at the forefront of that relationship building. And one organization, for example, that I respect a lot that comes to mind is Mission Blue. And Chris, I know that that Good Catch has just very recently established a partnership to support Mission Blue. Would either of you like to comment on Sarah's points around, working at the intersection of what those communities need and listening to their needs and oceans protection?
I would like to hear Ollie's answer. I'll start by saying intersectionality is critical, and if you don't understand the implications, we could be making problems that we're not aware of as well. So we're trying to look at this in kind of this 3D and 4D lens of what happens when all of a sudden we start adopting, coconut oil to make cheese or whatever it is. We are trying to look at that. We're trying to solve one problem at a time. We don't want to create another one in the process. Palm oil came because we got rid of whatever it was, trans fats, right? So what can we do to make sure we're not doing that? And everybody needs to be part of that conversation, but we can't slow down the progress and basically sit there in a spin doing nothing. So the good news is we're so small with what we do that we can't do a whole lot of damage, but we can at least start the conversation. And then let the local communities decide what they want to do. And the one final thing I'll say is, and then Ali can take over, is global adoption comes through local acceptance, and local acceptance is local form, flavor, function, and familiarity. We can't take a New England crab cake and sell it in Tokyo. There has to be something in there that's familiar to that constituency. And as a constituency, they should have a belief in it. They should buy into it, and it needs to serve them. And so what we want is to make sure that narrative is happening. We're going to give them tools, but they're going to have to solve it for themselves locally. Go ahead, Ollie.
No, you said that really well. I don't have too much more to add to that. I think, intersectionality is a word that's come about more in recent years as a way to sort of identify a problem that I think has happened where people go in with great intentions, but they don't look at the long-term consequences and look at where, if you poke something here, what's going to hit out here. And often it is those people in those areas that get the brunt of it. And that's happened a lot in the conservation world with environmentalism, going into places of Africa saying, right, we are establishing this as a nature reserve, get off the land, and that leading to a whole host of other problems. I think it just comes down for me, common sense, and just looking at this in terms of the incentives that you're creating and looking at consequences as well. I think you said it really well there, Chris.
Great. Okay, so we've got a question from Sarah, and again, anybody that would like to come up and discuss with the panelists in the few minutes that we have left, please join and just click share audio and video, or you don't need to share video. So Sarah asks, I would love to know the panelists' outlook on the power of nonprofits working in intentional ways, driven by research and expertise, specifically held by NGOs, which can arguably be at a pivot point, or I think so, working in places a government or private can't.
I think it's critical. I mean, I spent 7 years at the Humane Society. That's how I got into this space. And, changing hearts, minds, and policies is a really important task in the grand scheme of everything we're doing. And then coming with solutions is what brings it home. And again, you can't ask consumers to live a life of disappointment when it comes to food. You can't ask them because it won't stick. So what can you do? And this is coming from a guy who I'm the biggest meat eater, the biggest cheese eater you've ever seen. And I thought, I cannot be vegan and live with disappointment in every single meal for the rest of my life. So let's start with some cheese that stretches. And that's how Daya came about. Let's start with a burger that, or in this case, chicken that tastes good. And it was Guardian, and it was Beyond Meat. If we can get that solved one bite at a time, the NGOs and the NPOs and the educational efforts that go into that, these films, they create the interest, they create the aspiration. You have to start with the aspiration to get the behavioral change to start working. But if you don't come in with a solution, it's fleeting. I'm guessing it's about 11 days from viewing a video to going back to your old habit. I don't know, I'm making that number up, but it's not very long. All it takes is one little thing to push you back into that pattern again. And these patterns are really, really sticky for humans. So I believe it takes all hands on deck. That's the best way I can put it. And I think that these nonprofits, the media is playing a good role in it. Everybody needs to show up. We're in crisis mode and we don't have time. We just simply don't.
I'll add to that in saying that not all NGOs and nonprofits are created equal. And there are organizations that do great work and there's organizations that don't do so much work. And I think that's something that we found out making Seaspiracy is, what organizations are saying one thing, but actually not doing what the whole mission statement has said they're about. And so there is, I guess from my personal experience, I'm different from other people. I've spoken to these organizations myself. I have a lot of skepticism to some organizations, but I also champion and love so many others, whether that be Mission Blue or Sea Shepherd, or even small grassroots groups that we support from Sea Shepherd, from Seaspiracy, a group called Vital Actions down in Nicaragua, who like 86 cents will save a sea turtle's lives. They're just like a small group of people. They don't have offices. They don't have a big website. And what goes in creates change. But that's not to say that all NGOs aren't good. It's just that I've had some bad experiences. And I actually think that often some of the best solutions to real world issues can be solved through entrepreneurship and having a bottom line to worry about. And that's where like Good Catch Food comes in. That's the actual alternative that will fix this problem. You know, we can have 1,000 NGOs talking about the problem, but unless we have an alternative, then what's the point? And so I think there's a lot of value in entrepreneurship and businesses.
Yeah, and keep in mind that all of these companies that enter the space, they're just getting started. They're not done, right? So this isn't like Good Catch came out with this one product and now it's done. It's a win or lose. No, man, give it time. It just gets better. It can only get better. It can only get better. Seafood is in animal is kind of static. It's kind of be as good as it's ever going to get. We can actually be better than that. But we need time. We need a little lenience. We need a good hot sauce. All of that stuff needs
always.
We make it through to the next marker.
Cool. Well, I'm just going to finish up by sharing a couple comments. And they're not quite questions, but from Harriet Brainerd, good to be here. I work with an initiative, Cobalt, working in Amazon, Atlantic Coast, Costa Rica, Ghana, Iceland. We're partnering with others to do bioregional coastal mapping. That's awesome. Sorry. To help initiate transformational change through story mapping. I find that so many people, I would love to know more and how we can help with your work on commercial fishing industry. So Harriet, thank you for sharing that. And then lastly, Megan Crane. I work for the Coral Reef Alliance, global nonprofit, and we're working with fishing communities to develop income diversification and sustainable practices like aquaponics. We love to partner with corporations who are interested in the intersection between science and people. Both are important for the survival of coral reefs. That is awesome, Megan. I would love to learn more. There's some incredible work that you all are doing, and I think that just kind of more collaborative opportunities to support one another is needed. And let's start now. Let's get it going. And thanks again, CRISPR. I just love Mission Blue, so I was ecstatic to hear that Good Catch was supporting some hope spots there in marine protected areas. And Ali, I adore that you're working with local communities as well and supporting groups that are doing the work where it's most needed. And any last thoughts, guys, before we wrap up? And thank you.
Yeah, I went through
everyone.
I went through 33 years of my life not paying attention to any of this. And then my wife showed up and pulled some veils off my eyes that you can't unsee. And it put me into motion that I took the tools that I had, which was an entrepreneur, and put them to work. But if you're a writer, write a book. If you're a filmmaker, make a film. If you're a lawyer, be a animal rights lawyer. But take your tools and put them to work. Thank you for paying attention. And I'm hopeful. I'm trying to remain hopeful as best I can, and the work that you're doing are really helping. And the fact that people are listening today is heartening. So thank you.
Okay. What I'll add on to that is that, I mean, Seaspiracy is always going to be on Netflix. It's a resource. It's an engine that's always going to be seen by people. And, so keep watching it, share it with friends and family if they haven't seen it already. And, we've put a lot of effort into continuing the story outside the boundaries of the movie. And that's why we've invested a lot of time in developing our social media, especially our Instagram, so we can keep up to date with the breaking stories that are happening around the world. We've got investigators that are looking into different stories. And, the way that people can support us is, like I said, like we are actually getting donations, but we're actually funneling a lot of those donations out to other actors on the front line, like I said, Vital Actions. So when people buy our hoodie, we give a huge portion of that profit over to those groups on the front line. And like the future of fish is going to be ocean plentiful in marine life. That's what we need to aim for. We need an ocean teeming with life once again. And the way we get there is to stop effing eating them and moving in the direction we're eating plants. So if you can eat plants, if you can go in that direction, that's the most simple solution that we can get. And I think, Good Catch Foods, even making tofu scramble, those kinds of things. There's so many options in the plant-based space. We have a meal planner.
Chickpeas, mung beans.
Exactly. So there's so many options here, and I guess I'm extremely passionate about this, and I just want everyone to discover this incredible world of plant-based food, because like Chris said earlier, it's like you will never enjoy food as much as when you're eating plant-based.
Yep.
I love it. I love it. And for me, my ask is anyone that has any kind of unobvious strategic partnerships, get in touch. Anyone working in bioreactors and in growth factors and regenerative medicine and growth media, the cell ag industry needs a lot of help. The alternative protein industry needs a lot of help. It's not getting, it's gotten some attention, but it's still, we're very far away from the type of funding that is needed to really scale up and compete with industries that are extractive, that are getting subsidies. Coral, I love, really important, of course, to my father's native Philippines, and so many other places. But yeah, just thanks to everyone for listening. And I love that visual, Ali, of the ocean teeming with life. We will get there. I'm hopeful that we will get there. And part of why I'm hopeful is because amazing people really care and are working on incredible projects. And you guys are listening, everyone that's shared in our chat and is in the audience. Just thank you. And Ali and Chris, I'm so grateful for everything you do and for sharing today.
It's a pleasure.
Absolute pleasure. I'll leave it with a quote from Sylvia Earle at the end of the movie. She said, "Look in the mirror, figure it out, and go for it." And we need passion, we need innovation. So whatever you've got, put it towards helping the oceans, and it's gonna make a big impact. It's gonna be there for generations. So thank you for having me on here.
Yeah. Same.
Thank you so much for ending with that. And Sylvia, we love you. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.